Hey, welcome. Really glad to have everybody here with us for, I think, a seminar that I'm actually pretty excited about. We haven't talked about this. We talked about the airplanes part a little bit, but not the overland travel part very much. So I'm excited to talk about it with you. And, Steph, it seems like we travel so much that this is kind of like a no-brainer to us, but it's kind of intimidating if you don't do it much.
It really is. I mean, I was intimidated a lot the first time I, in particular, flew with firearms. And you do, to some extent, we'll talk about it, not always know what you're going to get into when you get there, know what to expect. You should be able to, but you don't always. But really, in general, it's actually very simple. And like you say, we've done it so much. We found a lot of tips and tricks, I think, that will be helpful for people to get them started on the right foot.
So true story. We're not going to talk too much tonight about NFA items, and but if you follow the Instagram or whatever, you realize I just picked up a couple suppressors, my very firstest ones. I'm like a kid in a candy store. Oh, I have some shushers. Look at this quiet time. I'm a cool kid now. And the funny part is I felt the same about that. Like, now I have NFA items. Can I travel about with these, or what's going on with that? And so I was like, to the internet, let me figure this stuff out. What can I do with X, Y, and Z? So I feel that for a lot of folks as well. So our goal tonight is to be concise. We don't want to overtalk. I don't want to, create huge problems, but we were going to make sure we get the information out. So I'm going to share this with y'all real quick and just kind of keep us all in peace and together. We're talking about traveling with firearms, all right? And we don't want you to get jammed up is the biggest thing. So let's talk about our learning objectives tonight. First of all, I want to understand the complexities of interstate travel with firearms. We're not talking about necessarily traveling from one city to another in your state, because those laws should be relatively uniform. There's only a few minority of states that don't have firearms preemption where, cities can enact different ordinances. They do exist, but they're pretty rare. And so really interstate travel is what we're talking about. We're going to talk about federal law for the most part here. And so there's going to be a good bit of discussion of making sure that you understand each state's laws, because states have their own sovereignty, and then also understanding federal law. We're going to understand the federal regulations with regard to commercial flight and firearms, and actually understanding this regulation. And the funny part is that here's your leading tip. I have yet to meet somebody in the TSA who actually understands 49 CFR 540.1111. They don't read it. They look at their website and they say, this is what we can do. And I go, here's the statute. How do we do that? And they go, but we do this other thing. And I go, but this is the statute. How do we do that? We'll talk about it in a little bit. But that learning objectives, we're actually going to learn to understand it. And then we're going to understand and consider international travel with firearms. And if there is anything that is a whole lot of it's internationally traveling with firearms, I'll give you some examples of that. Who's your instructors tonight? Number one is me. I am John Correa, founded Active Self-Protection in 2011. You probably know me already, but I founded ASP in 2011. I love going to gun school, and I'm a firearms instructor who does a lot of things. I'm a Force Science Institute graduate, and I'm a Force Science analyst and a realistic de-escalation instructor, Masada U Group Deadly Force instructor. I spent a lot of time teaching graduate students, undergraduate students, and congregations as a pastor. Got 2,500 or so of our videos on YouTube and Facebook, and we've analyzed, I said 30 to 35, more like 40,000 now defensive encounters for patterns and principles. We see them every day. I literally spend a significant chunk of time every day. Probably get sent, I don't know, Steph, what would you say between our inboxes? 40 to 50 emails a day, and another.
Probably. We're collecting them from so many different places right now. I don't know that I could give you an accurate answer. We would have to pull probably 3 different people in the company to find that out. So, which is pretty cool in and of itself. When I was doing it, it was dozens a day minimum.
Right. So lots and lots in 30s and 40s and 50s, and we see an awful lot of them. Our co-host tonight, Stephanie Widener, you introduce yourself.
Hello, I am Stephanie Widener. I am the CEO of Active Self-Protection, where I have worked in one capacity or another since 2014. Grateful to be here and be part of it. You can see some of my certifications there. The more relevant ones are the ones with a legal aspect to them, like Masada Ayub Group's Deadly Force Instructor, which is a 40-hour instruction course all about the legal, moral, and ethical issues surrounding deadly force. Probably more relevant for tonight's shenanigans is that we travel all the time. I'm probably flying a minimum monthly with firearms. We're driving to different states all the time. We spend a lot of time trying to figure out how to do this with the least amount of problem possible, and the best prepared to deal with any issues that may come up, because over the years lots of issues have come up, and I feel like we've got some pretty good plans in place to avoid that. So
yeah, we do a lot of travel with Active Self-Protection, and a lot of air travel, but a lot of driving travel across state lines too. I was just at your house for an in-person cohort for Active Self-Protection instructor certification, and that involved me flying from Arizona into Nebraska, then driving through Iowa into South Dakota, and then reversing that. And could be very easy, could have easily taken a trip into Minnesota, when we hit through Sioux Falls and those things. So pretty easy to hit a bunch of states in a hurry. And so I fly general aviation. So, where are you going, what, when, and where? And so these are the kinds of things we want to really kind of hit home about, right? And just give you some ideas of. Now, a couple of things with that is that it's not going to give you every nuance of law in your city, in your state. Number one. Number two, I really wanted to kind of talk about this in the beginning, that if something jams you up, if somebody gives you a hard time, the worst thing you can do is become the rules lawyer on the side of the road. The worst thing you can do is stand in an airport terminal and argue with a cop about what the law is. Now, I'm not saying you can't say, officer, here's the law and I don't understand how to work with this, can you help me? Or officer, this is this. But if I know my rights and you can't, that's just it's a recipe for disaster, especially where firearms are considered. Okay. And so I really want to encourage you to avoid that, and to recognize two things. Number one, don't be that guy, right? And if you get hemmed up doing stupid stuff, please, that's on you, not on me. And you shouldn't, right? Don't be the jerk. And also learn the laws. They're not that difficult. They're not completely opaque here. And so it's not hard to do. Now, on the other hand, we're going to see a few good people. And I see this all the time. I'll tell you the number one thing I see is people think, I have a CCW permit, so I'm good. And then they fly with their gun into New York City. And that probably happens. I bet you there are 5 or 10 people a year who do this. And then when they get into New York City, they fly in from Florida or Arizona, and they fly into New York City for a weekend with the family, and all is well until they go to check their firearms at LaGuardia when they're going to fly home. And they check into the check-in counter and go, hi, I have firearms to check. And the clerk says, okay, no problem. I need to see your firearms, registration for the state of New York. And they go, what? I'm not from here. I don't have any of that. And they call the cops, and the cops come and arrest you for having illegal firearms in the state of New York, and you're jammed up. And they go, but I'm fine. And you go, oh man, you can't do that stuff. You're going to get jammed up doing it. This is no different than people who admit to straw purchases of firearms. They admit that, oh, my mom gave me some money so I could buy her a Blue Label Glock. And so I went and bought mom a Blue Label Glock with money she gave me. And you go, you just admitted a felony, sir. Please remove that from the internet. And these kinds of things happen. Same thing with traveling shouldn't happen though.
And if I could add to that, one thing that I think is kind of important to understand with this is use of force laws, like we've talked about a bunch. Like if you have to use your firearm or any tool in a defensive encounter, while they're worded differently and have different nuance across the country, in general, they're very similar. You need to know some general principles to function anywhere in the country, and you don't have to dive quite as deep into the specific state laws regarding defensive use of firearms or other tools. But the carry rules and the possessing rules and all of these things can be very different state to state. So that's a part of what John is talking about, that you really need to know those laws from state to state, not just must I shoot someone.
Yeah.
That's a whole different kettle of fish than the laws that we're talking about right now.
Yeah, the actual firearms laws can vary significantly state to state. Some do, some don't. And so, like for instance, I will just find it. Here's a pulled out of my hat, for instance, one. There are currently 26 states in the union that you can carry a firearm without a government permit. Half the country you can carry just as a citizen. One of those states, though, that only applies to residents of the state. Any idea which state that is?
Is it Ohio?
It's not Ohio.
Really? That's
Ohio
guess,
just became constitutional carry and allows non-residents the same privilege. It is the state of North Dakota.
Oh, interesting. I think I did read that somewhere, but that's not one you would have guessed. Ohio.
It's not one you would have guessed
for that, whereas North Dakota would be a bad guess for that, I think.
So here's the funny part. North Dakota recognizes all other states' permits, and residents can carry without a permit, but non-residents have to have a permit. And that's a weird quirk of law. Okay. Mm-hmm. So there's some stuff there. Yeah. Yeah. Robbie said he was going to go for New Jersey. Really, Mr. All right, Mr. Smarty Pants. All right, let's take a big deep breath here. Okay. It's very common to have anxiety about this stuff. All right. It's very common to really kind of get worked up. And especially because I think what we do is we get this idea that this is, I'm going to get hemmed up here. These are firearms involved. The government hates me having them, or something like that. And so I'm going to make a mistake and end up in prison for 30 or 40 years. If you do stupid things, that can be the case. But we're going to educate you here and make sure that you know the right thing to do. And that's the big thing.
I think there's a piece of it too that we have kind of ingrained in our soul there, that you don't have firearms in an airport. You go through these security places and you can't have any weapons, and that's all about security. When that's not the exact fact of the matter. There's lots of places in an airport that you can have even your concealed carry on you outside of security. And most places, if you can possess a gun on your person, it's just fine. So there's that tension of walking into an airport with a gun is kind of scary. But when you're not behind the secure part of it, it's actually pretty okay.
Yeah, amen. Stephen Mariner said, Ohio's getting better each year. Constitutional carry and reciprocity is getting better. That's a good thing, right? Have you been to Cleveland lately? Everyone needs to be carrying guns, for God's sake. So why can we not do that? Okay, so big deep breath. It's really not that hard. I really just want to encourage you. It's not that hard if you know the rules and you follow them. The big pain in the behind comes from not following the rules. If straight up, if you follow the rules, you're probably okay. Probably. Okay.
They may have additional rules for you to follow, which we can talk about when you get there. But but generally, they will give you an opportunity to follow their additional rules. But for the most part, yeah, if you know the rules and you follow them, and it's not unusual actually to even help explain the rules and talk about them. It's actually really easy. The rules aren't terribly onerous either. They're pretty simple.
And so we're going to talk first and foremost about traveling via car, and then we'll start talking about air travel and commercial air travel in particular. And I just want to handle this up front. A lot of people are like, wait, but my Second Amendment, right? You can't infringe on my right to keep and bear arms. I'll take my guns wherever I want. F the man and those things. Okay, let's lay it out there. A well-regulated militia being necessary to the security of a free state. The right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. And I believe, I am a Second Amendment absolutist. I believe that you should be able to order an M240 Bravo delivered via Amazon Prime to your front door, okay? And I believe that when you could do that in the parlance of the day, order a Browning automatic rifle via the Sears and Roebuck catalog, we didn't have mass killings in America, okay? I don't think that's not a causation, but it is a correlation. And so something else is the problem. And I think, again, a robust Second Amendment, absolutely agree with it. I think, infringements on the Second Amendment are patently disallowed. I think we're making small progress in this arena. Pretty good. However, I want to remember a couple of things. Every state has its own sphere of sovereignty. Every state is sovereign, and maybe in a decade we'll have a national reciprocity, but it ain't here yet. So some people say, well, I don't care what they say, I'll carry wherever I want to carry. Hey, listen, if that's your level of risk tolerance, that's on you, man. I'm not going to tell you what to do. And if you feel like F the man and you're going to carry no matter what, okay. But recognize that you can get jammed up for that pretty good. And by jammed up, I mean a decade of enjoying prison food. And that's not the kind of gated community that I want to get Stephanie shaking her head at because she knows what's coming next. Everybody's watched the other guys.
I'm waving you off. I can even have a lot of sympathy for that mindset. Obviously we want to have all of our freedoms and all of our civil rights and everything. So I get that. You just have to really spend some time thinking about your risk tolerance and be smart. Make good decisions. Mom in me says.
Yeah, well, and I mean, listen, for me, where I am, my most likely place for that is California. I've got family in California. And so, but dude, your firearms rights stop at that border and you go, gosh darn it, man, I hate that. But recognize the headline test of, internet YouTube gun celebrity arrested on gun charges in Alameda County doesn't pass the sniff test. And I joke about it at the bottom there, your disdain can keep you warm at night in prison, but maybe that'll be your cellmate instead who keeps you warm at night.
His nickname is Disdain.
His nickname is Disdain. So we don't want that. We want to do things in a lawful manner, okay? So let's talk about traveling via car. Don't want to belabor the point. Really, honestly, between states, it's really not terrible if you're traveling by car, all right? Now, I want to be very clear what we're talking about here, okay? We're going to talk about concealed carrying it separately. We're going to talk about that piece of it another time. Right now, we're talking about transporting firearms. We're talking about, I am in Arizona and I want to drive to, let's just say I had somebody in Northern California and a hunting cap, and I wanted to take my hunting rifle with me up to this hunting camp in Northern California. I'm a hunter. I like to hunt. And so how might I do that? That's what we're talking about now, okay? Transporting, not carrying of firearms, keeping arms, but not bearing them right now, okay? Biggest thing you need to do is you need to be legal to possess the firearm in the state you are leaving and legal to possess it in the state that you're traveling to. Now, there can be states in between. And there can even be states that are not legal for you to have that gun in that state in a limited sense. We're going to talk about this here, okay? It must be, in order to be traveling by car and be covered here, unloaded, inaccessible, and the glove box and the console are considered accessible. So it either needs to be in the trunk, but if your car doesn't have a trunk, in a locked box. So unloaded, locked in a box, inaccessible, then you're covered under the federal laws for transport of firearms. Again, we're not talking about concealed carry, reciprocity, and those things. That's a different kettle of fish entirely. So basically, 18 United States Code 926A covers us to do things that some states don't want us to do. The federal government says that the right of free travel between states for the people has to be respected. So this is actually the feds actually looking out for us here, but it's a very narrow set of looking out for us. And there's protection here from the feds that a state can't hem you up for transporting a firearm if you do it the right way. So let's look at the way that you do that, right? This is it again. I will send you this presentation, so don't worry about writing this down, but it's 18 United States Code section 926A is your friend, and I'm going to read it to you. Here it is. There is so many words here, right? And why are some of the words blue? Because I copied and pasted this from the United States Legislature's website, okay? So those are hyperlinks in there. Okay, notwithstanding any other provision of any law law or any rule or regulation of a state or any political subdivision thereof. Whew, that's a lot of things saying we're not jamming up any other state laws and we're not screwing with them. Any person who is not otherwise prohibited by this chapter from transporting, shipping, or receiving a firearm, so if you're not a prohibited possessor, shall be entitled to transport a firearm for any lawful purpose from any place where he may lawfully possess and carry such firearm to any other place where he may lawfully possess and carry such firearm if during the transportation the firearm is unloaded and neither the firearm nor any ammunition being transported is readily accessible or is directly accessible from the passenger compartment of such transporting vehicle, provided that in the case of a vehicle without a compartment separate from the driver's compartment, the firearm or ammunition shall be contained in a locked container other than the glove compartment or console. That was the wordy United States Code definition of what I just told you. So technically by the law, you can actually have them in the trunk of the car and not have them locked up, because they consider the trunk of the car a separate place. So you can just have them in, any way you want. You could take your hunting rifle and dump it in the trunk of the car as long as the trunk is separate from the rest of the vehicle. But if not, if you don't have that, or it's in the main compartment of the vehicle with you, ammunition has to be separate from the gun, have to be locked. If we do that, then what we have is a transport under this particular statute, 18 United States Code 926 Alpha. So what that prevents us from getting a state like New Jersey. So for instance, if I am traveling, say from, oh gosh, how would I do that? Let's just say I was traveling from Pennsylvania to up to Vermont or up to New Hampshire. Let's just say I'm traveling Pennsylvania, New Hampshire. It's a beautiful country. We're going to go up there for the weekend, blah, blah, blah. And I know I can carry in Pennsylvania and I could carry in New Hampshire, but not in New Jersey. I can take my handgun, put it in a case, unload it, put it in a case, lock that case down, keep the ammunition separate, lock it down, and drive straight through New Jersey. And even if I get pulled over in New Jersey, I haven't broken any laws, and New Jersey cannot hand me up for that. As long as a couple things are met, okay? But we do have to be aware of some of these gotcha states, all right? You got to be aware of these gotcha states, and here they are: New Jersey, New York, Massachusetts, Hawaii. Now, if you actually get to transport by car to Hawaii, I want to know how you did it, because that would be quite the feat. California, Illinois, Washington, D.C. Now, I want you to note that Washington, D.C. is actually now shall issue to any citizen of the United States. I'll say that again. Washington, D.C. is shall issue CCW permit to any citizen of the United States. All right. Now that said, they make it as onerous as they possibly can. And it's a 16-hour course that has to be taken in the actual District of Columbia and then do all the hoop bull crap. So it's not like you're just going to show up. You have to have a DC permit and only a DC permit. They don't recognize anybody else's permits. And you can't do a whole bunch of stuff in DC. Like you can't go to the National Mall. You can't go to any of the public national monuments or any of that stuff. They banned all that crap. But you can actually get a DC permit for what that's good for. Now, the bottom one here is important, all right? In my opinion, if you are traveling using 18 United States Code 926 Alpha, it is best not to stop in these states at all if traveling through them. So what I mean by that is this transport law only truly exists while you are transporting. Now, transporting means you're going somewhere, right? So now you go, but what if I stop for a meal? Now the state has some leeway. Well, they're not transporting anymore. They stopped. They're here. They've reached a destination. Now, I think the counter argument is it's normal during the course of transporting and travel to stop and eat or to get fuel, and that might be the case. It leaves an opening. Your best and easiest bet is not to stop at all, and then that way you can. If you get pulled over, it's in the process of driving, not while you're stopped somewhere.
Yeah, if you can just mitigate that risk as much as you can. Obviously, if you need to stop and use the restroom on a 6-hour thing, maybe you decide that's worth the risk, stop at the rest area, use the restroom, go. Maybe if you can avoid a meal, if you can avoid the overnight at the hotel, those things, you want to mitigate that level of risk as much as possible so you don't end up having to negotiate that, whether you're transporting or not transporting at a billing rate of whatever your lawyer charges to help you negotiate what that actually meant.
And especially because if you're traveling through a city, right, or you're traveling through a state and you get hemmed up in that state, probably whatever attorney you know in your state is probably not barred in that state. So who do you got? And I know some people that think, oh, well, I'm just going to call FLP, Firearms Legal Protection will protect me on that stuff. If that ain't a use of force, that's misconduct involving weapons, not a use of force. So your coverage, I don't care what the organization is, they're not going to cover you because it's not a use of force. It's you committing a misconduct involving weapons. So I want to be careful with these states, the gotcha states in particular. You want to be very, very wary of. Okay, and you know, even some other states. So if you're transporting in particular, so you're like crossing over into enemy territory. And we joke about that. You remember back in the day when there was East Germany and West Germany, but there was within East Germany, you had West Berlin and East Berlin, and there was a highway that you could drive that was technically in East Germany, but it was safe and available to drive all the way into West Berlin and out of West Berlin. And you can do that with your firearms, and you can drive all the way through East Germany like that. But recognize that is it's a fraught with danger drive.
Yep.
Okay. And you have to be wary of that. And listen, I live on the West Coast and it's pretty much okay out here. But I remember when I went to New Hampshire, I went to the Sig Sauer Academy, and beautiful country out there, and went for a week-long class. But of course, I got to make sure, okay, wait a minute. I flew, they were like, hey, you should fly into Boston. Boston is way easier to fly into. And I'm like, I'm not taking firearms in and out of Massachusetts. No, thank you. Absolutely not. And so thinking about those things really kind of matters, okay?
Oh, go ahead.
Yeah, I want to answer this thing from Kent. Obviously, law enforcement in those states have to have a reasonable reason to stop you, say speeding, but that doesn't allow them to look in the trunk. You're 100% correct. Where people get themselves in trouble, and I'm going to talk about this a little bit, it's a great point, is they get in trouble by saying what they shouldn't and doing things they shouldn't. So again, I would strongly recommend don't do stupid things with driving in those restricted states. If you're transporting guns via the 18 United States Code 926 Alpha, I would say, hey, don't do stupid things. If you're not speeding and you're not making reckless right-hand turns or whatever, and now we have an Illinois state trooper entering the chat, so, and we had another question. What about the ag inspection stations in California? I have been past those more times than I can shake a stick at. You know what they do? They ain't looking for you. They're not looking for guns. They at most, they ask about, do you have any fruit? Do you have any fruit with you? No. Have a nice day. Carry on. Keep coming. Most times they just look at me. Yeah, whatever. They don't even give you the time of day. They're mostly doing agricultural inspections, and so I wouldn't really give a hard time with that. So I would say, don't do stupid things. Don't give them a reason to pull you over. Okay. We're going to talk about this in our next slide. Okay. What about if I have a CCW permit? This is a pretty big deal. I want to talk about the case of Shaneen Allen. Now, Shaneen Allen is a big deal. A big deal here because Shaneen Allen lived in Pennsylvania, had a valid Pennsylvania concealed carry permit, happened because she made a wrong turn to drive into New Jersey. And she ends up in a spot where she doesn't know where she is, and she's got to get out of there. And so she makes a lane change to take an exit that was considered reckless. And so she got pulled over. In the process of that traffic stop, the trooper saw in her wallet, as she was thumbing through her wallet to get her ID, that she had a Pennsylvania concealed carry permit. And then he also saw in her purse, as she was rifling through it to get her stuff, he saw that she had a gun in her purse. And guess what? She got hemmed up and thrown in jail. They grabbed her up for the illegal possession of a firearm, threw her in jail. I think she was in jail like 40 something days or something like that. Ended up getting convicted, and it took a pardon from Chris Christie, who was the governor of New Jersey, to get that off her record, which is insane if you think about it, because she had a valid concealed carry permit, but of course it wasn't valid in New Jersey. So you've got to recognize that even if you're well-meaning, and she was well-meaning, she didn't even want to be in New Jersey.
Yep.
She's like, I don't even know what you're talking about. So I have a friend who lives in Bellingham, Washington. And one of the ranges that we use up in Bellingham, Washington, literally is at the last exit before Canada. And if you don't get off, you're going to Canada. And especially when you're going to the shooting range, you probably have guns. If you don't get off, we're going to talk about that in a bit, but just be really cautious of that. But the CCW permit, recognize that transporting is not concealing on your person or in your vehicle. Those are not the same thing. Now, before you enter a state, if you plan on keeping the firearm on your person, make sure on reciprocity. Make sure. Remember that non-resident permits are less likely to be recognized and by out-of-state people. Agreements change, and double check to be sure. So I'll tell you, this one comes after me sometimes, because when I first got my CCW permit, Nevada did not recognize Arizona. And so when we went up to Vegas, I couldn't carry up there. And then they did, and then they didn't, and now they do. So those things can change all the time. And if you're not paying attention to it, that can really do things. And Steph, you know this as a South Dakota enhanced instructor, that is an enhanced permit that it recognizes, or regular, and that's a big deal.
Yep, and you're going to talk about handgunlaw.us as your next point, and I found that to be an excellent resource, and I found it to be very up to date. There was at one point I was getting ready to travel into Minnesota, which my permit had been recognized in Minnesota, no issues. I went to handgunlaw.us, which I have as an app on my phone, and to just double check, familiarize myself with the specific laws, whether or not you have to inform officers that you're carrying a gun if you're pulled over, those kinds of things that vary from state to state, and it's hard to remember. So I will generally pull those up and check them. As I was doing that, my permit was no longer valid. Like, it had changed within a very short time, and the website and app was updated within that time frame. It was within days, and they were right on the ball with that. So I was grateful to have noticed how well they do keep that up. So it's a great resource for that.
And for those of you who are FLP members, the FLP app has that for you as well.
Yep.
So you got a reciprocity map there with FLP. So you have that available to you. Not everybody has that. I think everybody should have some coverage, but I'm not going to be a total homer shill. And so handgunlaw.us, trust me, I need you to think about this website. They're constantly updated. It's got a PDF of every state in the union. So if you're going to, say you're coming to the great state of Arizona from where you live, and you go, what are Arizona's gun laws like? Click on Arizona, up comes a PDF. Here's all the permits that they recognize. Here are their unique gun laws. Here's where the statutes are. And so that you get a great overview in a very readable package. Now, it also does stuff like, it will say, if I want to apply for a permit here, how do I do so? Do they issue non-resident permits? So if I want to plan ahead and those kinds of things, okay? It's just a really great resource, and I would strongly encourage you to just bookmark handgunlaw.us, especially because of how fast they update it.
Yeah, and they'll have that quick fact. So like, as you are traveling, I am traveling into Minnesota, I can pull up Minnesota, and they'll have the 5 quick things you need to know. You don't have to read pages and pages of legal terminology to understand where you're at. It will give you a short list of, hey, here's the main things you need to know. It's very, very user friendly. So,
and I will say this, probably the number one thing that I am constantly looking at whenever I am going into a new state, do I have to inform an officer upon first contact that I'm armed? That's a pretty big deal, and you want to make sure that you get that one right. So here in Arizona, it's no, you don't have to. You have to answer honestly, but you don't have to inform. So I generally won't unless I'm asked, and if I'm asked, I answer honestly.
Another big
And
one is whether or not signs matter. If a
yeah,
particular business says no guns on the property, no concealed carry, no weapons on the property, whether or not that's actually legally enforceable as a gun issue is on there. So that's super valuable. And preemption is also really good to know. Most states don't have any issues with preemption, but a couple do. And what preemption means is that specific state or specific cities or localities within that state can pass stricter laws than the state itself. So something may be legal in the entire state, but a city in that state may decide it's not legal. And most states don't have that, but you kind of want to know it if yours does have an issue and you're going to that city. So it's
like Arizona has preemption, but the Arizona state government has had to smack the city of Tucson down multiple times because Tucson City Council will be like, we don't care what they say, we're going to pass this law, and then Arizona State goes, oh, bam, stop that. That is stupid.
Yeah, we literally have a law that says you can't do that, Tucson.
Right.
And before we move on from that, whether you're transporting firearms or whether you are trying to conceal carry on your person, I think tribal lands are important to be aware of as well. It's such a huge topic and it's really difficult because each tribe can make their own laws as to what it means and what you're able to do on their land and on their property. And that can change as the different government changes, their government changes. And so you may not have easy access to what you're able to do. So generally, as long as you're traveling through, like we talked about earlier, you're probably going to be okay. At least in my state of South Dakota, we have several different tribal areas, and the general understanding is as long as you are driving through and traveling through, you're fine to transport, you're fine to conceal carry. If you start getting out and doing business, that's a whole different thing. And you may be okay, and you may not be okay. And you may be okay in October, but not in November. So it's really a challenge. And if you need to spend any significant time not traveling, but on tribal lands, you really need to get in touch with the tribal government to find out what is okay for you to do and what is not okay for you to do.
Yeah, I would generally treat tribal land like you're in one of those gotcha states. And we have a lot of tribal land here in Arizona. There's a bunch of tribal land in Arizona. And I think on my way to Grand Junction for the Girl and a Gun conference, I think I was driving through tribal land like 300 of the 500 miles. And nope, not getting out here. Nope, not getting gas here. Why? Because I probably had, I don't even want to think about how many guns I had in that truck on the way to the Girl and a Gun conference. Long guns. I had shotguns. I had pistols. I got ammo. I got targets. I got, what are you doing, sir? Nothing. No, totally fine.
And one of the funniest laws that I think one of the gotcha states has is the state of Illinois, and the Illinois State Trooper Kent can fact check me here if this is not correct. You can CCW your gun in Illinois in your car as long as you are traveling and not out moving around. So even though I can't carry or conceal a gun on my person as I am out and about in Illinois, I can. They have a bunch of pamphlets and information detailing it really well. You are able to travel with your concealed carry gun on you as long as you are traveling through the state of Illinois. I think that's
all of a sudden we sound like sovereign citizens, right?
I know.
I'm not driving, I'm traveling. I'm traveling the land.
I know.
What are you doing messing with me? Okay. All
Slope.
Right, here we go. We got to think about this one here. How about traveling to Canada or Mexico?
Don't.
Ready? How about no? Right? I mean, don't even think about it, is the bottom line. If you bring a gun to Mexico, you will get thrown into a Mexican prison if you get caught. And the police, especially on the border in Mexico, are known to be corrupt, and they will throw you in jail knowing somebody will come and pay you for them. And there's no due process laws in Mexico, and so you can end up in prison for months and not have a thing to do about it. I get it. So in San Diego, I lived in San Diego for quite some time. And there's big signs on the roadside in California about going to Mexico saying, don't take guns to Mexico. It's felony and you'll go to prison forever and we won't come save you. It's a big deal. Canada, same thing. Now there is a way to bring firearms into Canada legally in terms of people come up there hunting and doing sporting stuff. So there is a way to do it legally. I don't know if that's going to change with their current moratorium on firearms possession, which I don't get me started on what Canada has done. I'm aghast on every level. But if you show up and you roll through Customs and Border Protection in Bellingham, Washington, and you're on your way into Canada and they find a gun,
It's bad.
Those Kanuckistanis are nice people, but they have zero sense of humor about this kind of thing. Okay, they turn not very nice. They absolutely turn into Letterkenny as soon as that stuff goes down. Man, that's a pretty good pop culture reference right there.
No sense of humor.
Sort yourself out, bro.
It doesn't matter if you took a wrong turn or missed your exit.
It really doesn't. It really absolutely does not. So don't do it. And I would just say if you're man, driving into Canada, driving into Mexico, and I have done both. Okay, I literally have done both. I have pictures of me and my wife at the Canadian border and on our way into Vancouver for a weekend before we got on a cruise ship. We've driven into Mexico multiple times. I did mission trips in Rosarito and those things. Don't bring guns down there, guys. I know you say, well, I have a God-given right to defend myself, and life inside a Mexican prison sucks. Yes, don't do that. All right. Okay. Let's talk about air travel a little bit. Air travel, not that bad. It's not as big a hassle as many people think. Okay. Not a big deal. I will say this: you should expect every single airport to have some differences in details on how to get your bag scanned. Okay, I've never been in two airports that are the same, and while you kind of wish that wouldn't be the case, it makes sense. And the reason that it makes sense, in my opinion, is because every airport's laid out differently. Every airport has a different level of technology available. Yeah. Okay. So Kent, we'll talk about that in a minute. Kent's asking about guns getting stolen once they're checked in. It's not that it doesn't happen. There's a couple ways to really minimize it. Okay. So a couple of things on that. Every airport's different, and you should just expect that. So what I would encourage you to do when you show up with firearms to the airport is, number one, have a relaxed mental attitude. Number two, give yourself all the time in the world. Okay. I routinely at Sky Harbor Airport here in Phoenix, I fly with firearms once to twice a month out of Sky Harbor. And I can get, I think my record right now from the curb through past security, including checking firearms, is 9 minutes. And yet I get there 2 hours early every single time.
Sky Harbor, man, that's the JV team for TSA though.
No, it's the intramural squad. It's not the JV squad. It's don't get me started.
The funniest part though, just all that aside, of course it makes sense that it's a little bit different procedure in every airport. The sometimes frustrating thing is, I think the people that are doing the process don't know that or forget that. So they sometimes have an expectation that you will know exactly what's going on and exactly what you should do and how the process goes, not understanding that actually the signing in and getting scanned process and baggage claim are radically different from airport to airport, sometimes airline to airline, sometimes employee to employee. So you just have to be really relaxed and flexible, know the rules, follow them, and be ready to answer questions and discuss. And if you're relaxed, it's really not too bad. We'll joke a lot about silly things, but it's really not that bad.
Yeah, and it really isn't, right? So a couple things on this again. You may well know more than the ticketing agent and the TSA screener, but don't be that guy or gal who complains about the Second Amendment. And what you need to know here in the carriage of firearms in a commercial flight is 49 code of, this is now it's not in United States code, but this is in the code of federal regulations. This is a regulation, not a law. 49 CFR 1540.111 is the controlling mandate. Trust me on this. When you were a rookie, print this out and take it with you. Now, I say this for a reason. I'm going to show you this because TSA does not follow it all the time. And when they don't, sometimes showing the statute is enough to get them to do so. Okay? 49 CFR 1540.111. This is one you want to know. You don't need to be able to cite it. You need to be able to show it. Okay. So here's air travel. This is, again, the controlling and mandate. We're going to talk about what has to happen. Your firearms and ammunition must be in checked baggage. Okay. And that means even anything that looks like a firearm needs to be in your checked baggage. I goofed on my flight home from Kansas City. Neil and I went and taught in Arkansas, and some moron, somebody who shall remain nameless, who's a total idiot, threw my blue gun in my backpack. And I was even asking about it on Sunday. I was like, where'd my blue gun go? I haven't seen my blue gun. Anybody see my blue gun? Oh, dang it, I lost my blue gun. So then I checked my bags and they were off and gone. I checked through my carry-on bag before I went through because I always do a last check. Lo and behold, here's my blue gun. Well, it's a hunk of plastic. It's not a gun. And I go, hey, I don't want to bring it through here, but without permission. But if I bring this, is this going to light up? The guy sent me goes, no, you can't bring that here. Not a chance, fam. Well,
even when I carry blue guns or orange gun, which is a blue gun, obviously you put it in your checked baggage, but I still treat it like a firearm when I do, because my concern is always it will show up in a scan as a gun that wasn't declared. So I just make sure that it is with my other guns and locked up. Technically, it probably wouldn't need to do that, but I really don't want somebody x-raying it and then giving me a call because they think there's a gun in my bag. So now they're going to toss all these skivvies out on the table and go through them. So it's just one of those things that I think is a lot easier. Little things like that can be super helpful. And when I put my gun, you're going to talk about that next, I guess, the empty chamber and empty magazine. I'll even keep my gun open. I'll lock it open so that it's very obvious when we open the case that gun is empty.
Yeah, and so again, making sure that they are in checked baggage. So one of the problems that we see here all the time is we see several thousand times a year, people try to bring guns through the security screening in their carry-on, and almost always it's by accident. In almost every case, it is on accident, and they get jammed up. Thousands of dollars in civil fines, tens of thousands of dollars. Okay, so the gun has to have an empty chamber, and any magazine in the gun must be empty. So loaded under the federal guidelines for TSA is a round in the chamber or any cylinder or any rounds in a magazine that's inserted in the gun. That's their definition of loaded. So any magazine in the gun has to be empty. I would suggest no magazine in the gun and the gun being empty. Now, whether or not you lock the slide to the rear, I think depends upon the box, depends upon the gun, depends upon a lot of factors. If you have room for it, it's not wrong to do, certainly. I tend not to because my gun box that I travel with doesn't accommodate that very well.
Yeah, well, this is probably a good place to talk about what the reason that I do that. And I have one of the pistol cases I use that I can do that, and it lays flat. And it's really obvious when they open the pistol case to put the piece of paper on it. They often they decide it's their job to verify that the gun is empty, the check-in agent. And so they will often ask you to pick up the gun and show that it is empty. If I have my gun locked open, it's really obvious that it's not loaded, and then that can avoid us an awkward conversation. Although it's not that awkward, I just simply tell them there's no way I'm picking up a gun in an airport if they want to verify that the gun is empty. I mean, I verified it. I'm the one that signed my name on the line saying that it was empty. I'm the one that will pay the fine. If it's not empty, it's my responsibility, and I'm saying it's okay. But if you don't feel okay about that, then I need you to get a law enforcement officer over here to handle that gun and verify it. Because if you think I'm picking up a gun and waving it around an airport to show you that it's not loaded, that is not going to happen. And they usually immediately understand what they were asking.
Yeah, so recognize they'll have you fill out a little card, and that little card just says that it's your name, your address, all this stuff, what flight you're on, and then you flip it over on the back and it says the gun is unloaded and I'm transporting it legally, and then you sign it. And then if you're putting it in a box inside of another bag, they'll tape it to the outside of your box. When I travel with a box that's nothing but firearms, it is the firearms case. I just toss it inside, put the locks on it, and they send it off. Okay. So, but what you do with that is you go to your full service check-in, and you just walk up. Hi, I have a firearm to declare. And it's usually an absolute nothing burger. Oh, sure. Here, fill this out. Great. Have a nice day. So again, here's the thing on this stuff. The gun has to be in a hard-sided container. It has to be locked. And it must be secure enough not to be able to be pried open. For many manufacturers' boxes, that means 2 locks. And if a manufacturer's box only has a lock on one side, it probably won't work. Because if they can pry it open and get a hand in there or shake the gun out of it, well, then that's not a secure container. It has to be in a secure container or they will not allow it. This is a big deal. So I'd recommend, quite frankly, get either a security container, something. It doesn't even have to be, a Fort Knox. It just has to be a hard-sided locked container is all it has to be. And the locks that you put on it, if you want to, they can be the cheapest, crappiest locks you ever saw in your life. As long as they actually lock, they meet the definition. I recommend a little bit beefier locks, but that's just me. Okay, ammunition, by the letter of the law, must be kept secure from unintentional primer strike. So by the letter of the law, if you load the magazine full, that meets the definition because the primers aren't loose around to get struck. But your best bet is factory boxes, no loose ammo, no bags of ammo or anything like that. There's an 11-pound limit on ammo, and 11 pounds is 350 rounds of 9mm. Now, I'm not saying I know people who think that that means 11 pounds per bag. I'm not saying that I know people that have taken 2 and 3 bags with them and put 11 pounds in each bag, but I totally know people who've done that. Not me.
Well, and it's probably important to realize that, like with the having rounds loaded in the magazines, the TSA is fine with that, though you may get your particular agent that isn't as fine with it and they want you to do something different. But the airline might not be. And so besides looking at what the regulations are regarding the government in air travel, you need to look at your individual airline and what they're willing to allow, because they get to pick how they want you traveling. So many of them specifically say that it can't be loaded in magazines and it has to be loaded in a box like the original box where they're protected that way. So I always find it helpful to look at the specific airline. It's very easy. Go to their website, Google firearms and ammo transportation. It generally lays it out for you. That's also another thing, that it's not dumb to have that resource accessible. It's not unusual at all to have to explain the process to the person checking you in. I've had to do that multiple times. This is the card. This is what we do. We tape it on the gun box. Here's where we go. I go over here. So they don't always know. So if you kind of have the not only the regulations from a government legal perspective, but the airline specific regulations, that can be really helpful.
Yeah, amen. All right, let's talk about one more piece on here. On 49 CFR, section 1540.111C24. I want to just read this to you. You could go read this whole thing, just Google it and it'll show up. It says that you cannot carry a gun on an airplane in checked baggage unless, and one of the unlesses is, so it has to be unloaded, it has to be in a hard-sided case, it has to be in checked baggage. We've already talked about those. And then it says the container in which it is carried is locked, and only the passenger retains the key or the combination. This is not what TSA's website says. TSA's website says only the passenger should retain the key or combination to the lock unless TSA personnel request the key to open the firearm container to ensure compliance with regulations. You may use any brand or type of lock to secure your firearm case, including TSA recognized locks. Number one, a TSA recognized lock does not follow the rule at all, because 1,000 people have the key to that. Every doofus in the TSA has the key to that. Okay.
And you're the one that signed the paper that your gun was unloaded and ready to go. Obviously, I doubt anybody back there is going to unlock your bag, load it with ammo or whatever, but you're the one that's saying you've secured this gun and signed it. It just makes sense. You should be the one that keeps protected access to that.
Right. So I strongly recommend, I buy for mine. Now I have a Nanook 935 that I travel with firearms all the time. It's a big beefy 4-gun case because I'm traveling with multiple guns and all kinds of other crap. That is that's my range bag as well. And it has big, beefy, green belt level pick-proof locks on the outside, monster locks in monster hasps. It would be, you'd have to steal the whole case and spend about 30 minutes with a grinder in order to get my locks and into my gun box, okay? You don't have to go that far, but go a little bit beyond the crappy locks that you buy at Home Depot. It isn't wrong or anything like that. There is a workaround. I didn't bring it here. Gosh darn it, I should have. If you're worried about, but I don't want them to even be able to take my key, because they can at times, right? It goes in some places. It's actually one of the things I like about TSA at Terminal 4 in Sky Harbor. It's going to go back to this table. They're going to open your case right in front of you. Cool. Here's my key. Have a nice day. Yep. They open it. They do their swabs. They look around. They poke around in it. They throw their little thing in it. They close it back up, lock it back up, hand me back my key. Great. Thank you so much. Have a nice day. I'm gone. Some places, though, they take that to the back, and I've heard, oh, I need your key to look at something. I can't do that by the regulation, because it says I am the only one that maintains the key, and I have to do that. Well, it says we can do that. No, your website says that, but let me show you the regulation, and it doesn't say that. So either bring me to the box or the box to me. Now you can get into a fight. You can't get into a fight if the only lock on your case is biometric. I need the key. Okay, there it is. Well, I need the key. There it is. It's my thumbprint. You can bring it to me or bring me to it. Your call.
And on that, that's why you want to have all of that extra time, because I've been in airports where they have flat refused to I was like, exactly that. Bring me to the bag, or the bag to me, or something, but I'm not giving you the key. And their compromise, until we talked about it for a long time, was that they would do that, but that meant bringing it back to the gate agent, and they would search it at check-in, meaning I would have to start over and go through security again, which is fine, and that will work, but you need to make sure you have plenty of time. If you're in an airport that you need all that 2 hours and they want to fight about it, and you have to go back to the gate check-in, and they told me at that time, well, you can request at the gate to have it searched there. Well, that's really nice to know when you're in the middle of TSA. But yeah, so that's one reason you give yourself plenty of time, even if, like John says, it only takes him 10 or 15 minutes to get checked in general. But you never know when somebody is going to want to have that argument. I mean, I've had it a couple of different times, and just on principle, I insist on having it but you're a little bit held hostage, because if your plane's taking off in an hour and they want to argue for 45 minutes, that's a problem.
Yeah, it can be one. I will say this: it's very rare in reality to have a big problem like this. I've had it one time in probably 10 years of flying with firearms on a regular basis. Most times it's smooth, it's easy. Every once in a blue moon, they might want to look in because their scatterback thing didn't see your stuff or something like that. It can happen, but it's pretty rare. Okay. Now let's talk quick about baggage claim. Most of the time, you will go through special baggage handling to get the bags with the firearms in it. Okay, most of the time, but it's totally inconsistent. Every airport is different. Every airline is different. Every airline is different in their policies. Delta will not give you a bag back without putting these giant zip ties on your bag. I mean, like big, thick, fat suckers. They go north to south and east to west. So then that way you can't get in the bag, and you got to wait till you get home or whatever, which is total crap. I find that offensive and heinous, and so my reaction to that is, I always travel with my individual first aid kit. On your carry-on, you can have a set of trauma shears in there. They just can't be more than 4 inches past the hasp, and they have to have a blunt tip. Don't try Leatherman Raptors, but a cheap $8 set from Amazon goes right in there, gets through TSA every time. And then you just cut them off when you get there. I've only flown Delta twice since they started that policy, and I will literally cut them off and drop them on the floor in their special baggage handling in disdain. And
it's frustrating because it is I have a gun in this bag sign, and that happened to me the first time in Atlanta, and I didn't know it at the time, and how difficult it was going to be to remove those. So I had to take this bag with me for multiple hours till I got back to where I was staying. This basically, I have a gun bag, and that's not great. I mean, talk about a theft issue. I left the secure area of the airport and was just running around letting everybody know I had a gun. So yeah, that's a problem.
Yeah. So now there's a couple things on this that I want to address. Kent asked a question about theft once the firearm's checked in. So the airline, when they take possession of your bag, they are responsible for the contents of your bag. They are responsible in some respect for that. When you declare the firearms, some of that is they accept responsibility to make sure that firearm gets to you. Couple things in a modern context. If you're a part of the cult, air tags are freaking life. Stick an air tag inside your firearms case. Air tags run like $25 each, last for forever. It will tell you if your firearm got on the plane with you, will tell you everything that's going on. If it's if it's 5 minutes before your flight and your air tag is not reporting that your gun box is on the plane, you need to be saying something about that. And hey, something's wrong. This is also why I make my case just a royal pain in the butt to get into. They'll look at that and they go, no, I'll wait till somebody else's. It's easier. It's like your house getting broken into. It doesn't have to be Fort Knox. It just has to not be the easiest house on the block. Okay. So that's what I would do. Now, also we had a question about being diverted through New York. It can happen. All right. So you might say, oh, okay, I was supposed to go to New Hampshire, but our flight got diverted to LaGuardia. We have to stay overnight because of bad weather. I think it's pretty rare, but it can happen. If that's the case, you need to tell them in no uncertain terms, I cannot take possession of my bag. I cannot take possession of that bag because it would be illegal. You're asking me to commit a felony in the state of New York. I will not do it. And if they insist on that, go get a New York State police officer. Okay. There's tons of cops around there. Officer, this airline is asking me to commit a felony. What would you like me to do? And do what they say. Okay. Because again, this is not my fault. I didn't do this. This is not what I want to do. I don't want to take possession of this bag. The airline has agreed to take possession of it until I get to my destination because it has a firearm in it and I don't want to mess with it. What do you want me to do? Okay. And just make sure that those kinds of problems that we don't. Jamie asked what brand on the BioLock. A lot of the BioLocks suck, quite frankly. I'm using one that's made by Winston right now, and it's pretty okay in a little tiny one. There you go. Yeah, and they say they put the ties on in front of you at the baggage claim. Yeah, I know. And I've said, I'm going to cut those off. And of course, the employees are like, yeah, but I have to. It's regulation. Okay. And then they literally give it to me. Great. Clip, dump. Have a nice day. Your stupid policy is not my responsibility. And I have done that. Okay. We're almost done tonight. So let's keep on trucking, shall we? So just watch that at baggage claim. Now I will say this, like Southwest Airlines, their policy is to take anything that's like a high value item. So locked bags and big expensive items to special baggage handling. They're about 85% on that, 90% on that. And then about 10% of the time I'm standing there and my gun box dumps out with the big locks on it. Which I don't, because I'm a pretty well a hawk on that stuff, it doesn't bother me, but it bothers me a little that I'm like, look, dude, I told you guys not to put this on the regular claim. So just pay attention. Okay. Now, let's talk about gunning up in the airport. Okay. I know some people who were like, John, we're in a place I don't like being without my guns on. I want to have my concealed carry gun on. I'm not saying that I have had a national level firearms trainer, like loading magazines and freaking putting guns on in my car when I came and picked them up at the airport or anything. I'm not saying that happened. I'm not saying they pointed a gun at me either, but
totally did. And it wasn't me.
Yeah, it wasn't Stephanie. My point is that be very careful with this. Okay. I would just really recommend that. To me kind of borders on paranoia a little bit. If you're going and your host can gun up and you're like, hey, you're designated shooter, you're designated defender. I will sometimes in the airport, if I can, like I'll take my OC spray and throw it in my regular clothes bag that's not locked up. And then once I grab that bag, I'll just pop that box open real fast, put my OC spray in my pocket. That covers, again, an awful lot. Not as good as a gun on me, but it's certainly better than nothing. But a couple things to just be remembered of. If you have to gun up before leaving the airport, I would look for the family bathroom with the single stall, locking door, nobody else around. They almost always have those now. And I would definitely look for there. And I would beware of state laws banning the carriage of firearms anywhere in the airport. There are states that the carriage of a firearm anywhere in the airport is a crime, and you want to watch out for that. And I straight up, what I tend to do is I tend to wait. We get to the rental car place or whatever, and then it's almost always super quiet. You're throwing your guns and you're throwing your bags in the trunk and whatever. And I'll just sit there in the trunk, whether that's I pop the trunk open the box there, do all the things, put the gun in its holster, get everything right while it's sitting here, nobody else is seeing it, and then just snap and go. So it's exposed for 5 or 10 seconds and it doesn't alarm anyone.
And the biggest issue there is what we always need to remember, and that is our most dangerous time. as firearms owners and handlers is that administrative handling and the loading of our gun and trying to get it on our body, particularly trying to do it surreptitiously or while our attention is really focused there, is really a prime time for an accident. So you really have to be extra on the ball and mitigate that risk as much as possible.
Yeah. So, so just be cautious of that stuff. Okay. This is interesting. Joshua Green says, he went to go check baggage and from the luggage attendant and discovered that the bag was tagged as his daughter's. So technically the luggage attendant had to issue the bag to the 14-year-old, which is bad since in that state, anyone under 21 cannot possess a handgun. So now that seems to me, okay, we know this was a mistake and a problem or whatever. And so that shouldn't jam anyone up. That seems stupid. But I think it's wise to just go look, if that's the gun that's the one with the gun on it, make sure it's got my name on it. I think that's a good, easy check. Okay. One last thing is, let's talk about flying with firearms first into Hawaii. Now you can fly with firearms into Alaska, which is not part of the lower 48. No problem. All right. Alaska, they're like, bring the guns. We don't mind. Now, of course, if you're going to get on a cruise ship, they definitely mind you getting on a cruise ship with guns. So there's problems there. But if you're just flying in and out of Alaska for whatever reason, not a problem in the universe. Do your thing. As long as you're not getting off the plane and doing things in Canada. Hawaii is a different story entirely. Hawaii has incredibly draconian gun laws. So just be very careful. I would strongly suggest, unless you know exactly how that's all going to go, don't bring guns to Hawaii. Okay. Just don't. I wouldn't. Now, on that note, let's talk about international flying. Okay. So same thing here. Bringing guns overseas, heck no. All right. As a general rule. Now there are some exceptions to that. I was just talking, they did the World Shoot a couple years ago in Thailand. And so they basically created a special path just for the people coming for the World Shoot to bring their handguns, their shotguns, their rifles for these things for their IPSC World Shoot. Okay, fine. But understand, now you're dealing with Customs and Border Protection in the US. You are dealing with the foreign customs and their laws and how that's going to go. It takes months of planning to get this right. I can tell you this, that when I traveled to Brazil for a business trip, went down to MagTech in 2019, spent some time there with them, including doing some classes. And we thought, oh, we're going to bring some firearms because we're going to do some teaching for them. And it became so onerous to do that with the State Department that we just gave it up. So no, it's good. We're just not going to. So for that class, we shot a bunch of Taurus pistols because they were in country already and we didn't have that problem. And importing a couple HKs to do a class, heck no, big deal problem. So just big fat avoid, okay, at all costs. So the big thing, traveling with firearms, be smart. Remember the Be Smart speech?
Do.
So let's just make sure that number one, if we're driving, that if we're concealed carrying, that we know the laws of every state that we are in, and that you avoid creating problems with that. You know, when I drive into California, man, just recognize, no, not concealed carrying a firearm into the state of California, can't do it. For you, that might be a different state. Just be very cautious. Josh asked about things like certs. A cert pistol is not a gun, but I would treat it, especially for international travel, as if it was a gun. You may find, especially with a language barrier, if you're traveling internationally, that they have no patience for that kind of stuff and no humor for it either. It depends on where you travel, but I just don't think it's probably worth it to do anything like that. Okay. In the US, in terms of domestic air travel, if it's not a real gun, you've got a good thing when you say, well, wait a minute. They say, well, why didn't you lock that up? It's not a gun. It's a trainer. It's not a gun. It can't launch a projectile. And so it's not a gun. And so I didn't declare it because it's not a gun. Don't try to take it in carry on though, because you won't get away with that. Okay.
I, on the other hand, would just to save time, I would call it a gun and I would lock it in a box and I would deal with it that way. So when it shows up later on an x-ray or something and they see a gun shaped object, they're not jamming you up. You already said what it was, even though that's not what it is. I would just be concerned with any gun shaped objects that that they're going to wonder what they are and not be very happy with you if they have to call you back. And if you have
Now,
plenty of time, it's not a big deal.
I'm not saying I have friends who travel with guns. They'll take a gun and stick it in their big camera box just so that it gets extra scrutiny and extra care in being taken care of by the airline. I know people who do that. I have a firearm to check, and it's full of camera gear with one little bitty LCP in the corner.
So you can also, so you don't have to use the TSA locks for that and everything as well. They're just more secure.
Yeah. So I know people who do that. That's fine. When talking about driving, just make sure, again, you understand the law. You understand if you're going to conceal carry that you've got rights to do so in the states that you're traveling through. If you don't, that you follow the law appropriately, lock it up appropriately before you leave, the state that you could, and then do the right thing on those, transport appropriately, know that 18 United States Code 926 Alpha, and it's not quite as onerous as you think it is. Just be sure that you're legal in the state that you go to. The ones that are trouble for people in particular, New Jersey and New York, highly problematic. Like, can't even bring a gun into the state unless you have prior permission and you have registration. So don't do it, okay? Massachusetts is almost as bad. Maryland's almost as bad. You just want to be very careful in those states. And Connecticut's not a whole lot better, but if you stay away from kind of the Northeast, like the really bad parts in the Northeast, and then California and Hawaii, you probably don't have too much trouble. I'll even say this. I know a lot of California cops, okay? I know a lot of California cops. And I've never met a California cop that'll hem up an otherwise good person for simply having a gun that wasn't quite right. Okay? And I know that cops have let dumb gun owners get away with a lot of dumb stuff. I don't want to be, I don't want to depend upon the generosity of an officer in their performance of their duties and their, leeway in enforcing the law. So I'd rather not do that. But you shouldn't get jammed up if you just did one little thing wrong, but you might get that one officer who decided you were a shithead and he is going to jam you up. I mean, that can happen. And so you don't want to be that. Okay. Travel by car, make sure that you know the rules. Travel by air, the rules are pretty darn simple. Locked hard-sided case, can be inside your luggage or it can be its own luggage, depending on which one you want to do. You got to declare it at the ticketing counter, fill out the piece of paper, make sure the ammo is not in the gun. The gun is completely unloaded. Ammo's in the manufacturer's boxes. Pretty easy. Now, someplace I will say this, I didn't say this before, like I say, TSA at Sky Harbor, Terminal 4, they're going to open your box right in front of you. A lot of places, you take it over to this big machine that they have, they dump it on one end of the machine, it goes over to the other end of the machine, they go, have a nice day. Some places, I was just in Omaha. In Omaha, that machine is in the back in the secure area. So they just dump it on the conveyor belt and they go wait over there for 10 minutes. Okay, go wait over there for 10 minutes. 10 minutes expires and you go about your merry business. That's how this goes all the time.
But generally, if you just show up and declare it, they will kind of walk you through what you have to do after that. You don't, it's very simple. Once you've done it once or twice, it's really simple. But for the most part, if you show up at where you're checking in with your ticketing and say, I have a firearm to declare, they'll walk you right through it.
Yeah. And once you've done it a time or two, especially, it becomes pretty much a non-issue and non-entity. I remember like, I'd go up the first time, like, I have a firearm.
Right.
And worried. And now I'm like, hi, I have firearm to declare. And she's like, oh, is it? And I go, yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am. Yes, sir. Here's all the stuff. Pop. Here's my locks, this and that. Here's the thing. Fill that out. Great. There it is. Clunk, clunk. Can I walk it over? Do you want me to walk it over? And they're like, oh, you do this a little bit. Yeah, I'm used to the process. I know what's going on, and that makes it easy. So what questions do you have? What questions are you left with tonight after watching this? Certainly, if you're watching on YouTube, make sure that you leave a comment with any questions that you're still left with, because we want to make sure we get to them. And since we post this on Active Self-Protection Extra, we can still make sure that all those questions get answered. It's unlisted. It won't be up for anybody else but people who have registered, for our Gold Patron members, and then for Firearms Legal Protection members. But I just want to make sure that everybody's questions get answered. Not seeing any new ones come in, Steph. So you get parting thoughts.
My parting thoughts are throughout the whole process, be nice. These are just people's jobs. They may not always be all that great with them. There's a lot of laws and a lot of things that regulations and rules that change all the time. And sometimes they're just not quite up to speed or whatever. You can be a good ambassador for your community. You can make it easy. Even the times where I've had challenges, the time that I was referring to earlier, where they insisted on taking my key, we were able to resolve that very peacefully. I was firm in what I was willing to do. We came up with a resolution that worked for both of us. And I never lost my cool or was rude with anyone, and they weren't rude with me. We worked through it in a way that was mutually acceptable. And I think just as you're interacting with people as a member of the gun community, remember you could be dealing with people that aren't particularly fond of firearms. They have a lot of preconceived notions about what a firearms owner is, and you can do a lot of good for our community and in the general fight for our civil rights to be polite, and that goes a long way.
All right, we've got 2 questions. Stephen Mariner, is there a long gun variant of handgunlaw.us? Not that I'm aware of. You probably could find that maybe on some hunting websites or hunting guides, but I'm not aware of anything like that for long guns. Levy asks, can we fly with ammunition with any airline? Southwest, I fly with 11 pounds of ammunition all the time. So whoever that ticketing agent was full of crap. And so I would just have asked for a supervisor. Hey, I need a suit because let me look up your policy, firearms and ammunition. They have it right on their website. You're allowed to fly with up to 11 pounds. That's in manufacturer's containers, and secure from primer strikes. So that was just wrong on every level. I'm a Southwest Airlines A-lister. I love me some Southwest Airlines. They're usually fantastic with firearm stuff and give me zero problems. Neil and Steph fly a lot of American because life is a freaking nightmare. But they're usually okay.
I've flown just because we have to go through a lot of different airports and airlines. I've used American, Delta, Allegiant, Southwest, all of those with good regularity and had very few problems. A few, and generally that was resolved by politely kind of escalating that to someone else. And it was fine, but we mitigate a lot of that risk by being very familiar with the TSA regulations and also the individual airline regulations. Sometimes the individual airline regulations are more onerous than the federal regulations, and you need to be aware of those because they get to pick. And you have to abide by those if you want to fly on their airline, or don't get caught breaking them, like the pepper spray.
Yeah, I'll say that's one. It's perfectly legal by TSA guidelines and TSA Code of Federal Regulations to carry OC spray in checked baggage. But most major carriers, most of the carriers prohibit it. Okay. And I actually get it, because you go, gosh, man, what happens if somebody's OC explodes in the baggage compartment and then they go get that baggage and now, blah, that's no good. So I understand it. I just don't care, quite frankly. And so I'd strongly recommend, if you were going to ignore that, to maybe take your OC spray and put it in a Ziploc bag, put it in a zip top bag or something before you put it in the checked baggage. So then that way, if God forbid you were to have a problem, it would hopefully stay contained in that zip top bag. Yeah, I've never had one explode because the baggage compartment's pressurized. I've never had a problem. I do it all the time, and I would just not declare that I had OC spray. But with the firearms, obviously you're required to do that. And it's not like loading up pages and pages of legal terms. It's actually very simple to familiarize yourself with both the federal regulations and the individual airline. I mean, they're in their facts, generally a little paragraph telling you exactly what to do. So yep. It's very simple. Just be polite, be ready to go with the flow, give yourself plenty of time in case you are one of the people that has to kind of escalate and talk through some things, and don't touch that gun once you as you are checking in, no matter how much they want you to do it. They love to ask. There's another, one last time tip. If you're at the airport, especially, and they say, oh, can you show me that it's unloaded? I say, hey, this little slip of paper that I just signed stipulates that I declare to you it's unloaded. I will not touch a gun in an airport, full stop. If you would like a law enforcement officer to come and clear that firearm, I'm okay with that. You may not touch my gun, because I don't know if you know how to do so. I'm stipulating it's unarmed. I'm declaring to you it's unarmed. If you would like a law enforcement officer to verify that it's unloaded, then okay, fine. Otherwise, I'm stipulating to you that I did it before I ever got here, and we go from there.
And all right, everybody. Well, every time is then they look at the gun and determine through their X-ray vision that it's unloaded.
There they go.
That's what has happened to me every time. Okay, good, it's unloaded. Okay.
Yeah. Most times on Southwest, they know once they see that I've done it a few times, they go, everything packed appropriately? Yes, ma'am. Yes, sir. Yeah, I do this all the time. It's all packed right. All right, here we go. Have a nice day. All right, everybody. God bless you guys. Stephanie, thanks for your knowledge. You are a pro at this.
Thank you. Well, we have to do it enough. We should be reasonably good at it. And as always, I appreciate like Robbie and Soleil and Jamie Green is in the seminar tonight. That's all Ask staff who are there, and they are helping to kind of support questions and comments. And we are super grateful to Robbie, who will be spending time making sure this video is ready for public consumption, and he will get it emailed out to all of you. I ask you to patiently give him several days before he gets it to you. He works a real job. This is his fun job. And so if you're patient with him, he will get you the video, he will get you the PDF of the slides, and it will be great.
It is not fun when you are impatient.
No, he doesn't get crabby, but I do. He actually works to get it out very much quicker than I would ask him to, which is why I'm particularly direct in saying don't give him a hard time, because he works way faster than he should be expected to.
And again, on YouTube, if you have any questions, put them in the comments. We're happy to answer them, or you can always reach out to us, and we're happy to answer questions for you as well. I want to say a special thank you to Firearms Legal Protection for sponsoring tonight's seminar. Thank you to all the FLP members who came and are watching after the event. And thanks to all of our Gold Patron members. We are really grateful that you're here as well. Grateful for your patronage of what we do so that we can pay the great staff like Robbie and Soleil and let's see, Jamie.
Jamie's here. I think that's all for
Steph.
staff.
All right, that's it. Steph, again, high five. Thanks so much. You're a rock star. We'll see you guys soon.
Thanks, guys. Bye-bye.